I had just finished my shift at the diner. It was another late night and I was exhausted, eager to get home and crawl into bed. Working the night shift had become a routine for me, but something about tonight felt different. The air outside was colder than usual, a sharp wind that cut through my jacket as I hurried toward my car in the empty parking lot. It was just past midnight and the streets were eerily quiet as I drove home. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. I liked the isolation, but it was nights like these when the silence felt more oppressive than peaceful. As I pulled up to my driveway, something caught my eye. A figure standing just a little way down the street. I squinted, trying to make out who it was. It looked like a teenage boy, no older than 17 or 18, wearing a dark hoodie that covered most of his face. He seemed to be watching me. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe he was just waiting for someone or walking home, I tried to reassure myself. I glanced at him one more time before stepping out of my car and hurried inside, locking the door behind me. I had no time for creepy encounters tonight. I brushed it off, trying to convince myself it was nothing as I started my nightly routine. I tossed my keys on the counter and made my way to the bathroom, the house eerily silent. I turned on the shower, trying to shake the weird feeling that had settled in my gut. After my shower, I changed into pajamas, but that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I walked around, checking all the windows and doors to make sure they were locked. As I approached the living room window, I froze. There, standing in the dim light of the street lamp, was the boy. He was closer now, standing across the street, his face still hidden under the hood. My stomach churned. I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend Emma. As the phone rang, I kept my eyes glued to the boy. He hadn't moved, just standing there, watching. Finally, Emma picked up, and I told her about the boy outside.
Do you think he's following you?
Emma asked, her voice tense. I don't know, but he's standing outside my house, I whispered, peeking through the curtains again.
Lock all your doors, and if he's still there, call the police,
Emma urged. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I quickly went around to check everything again, but when I returned to the window, the boy was gone. Relief washed over me. Maybe I had overreacted, I thought. Maybe he really was just passing by. I thanked Emma and told her I'd call if anything else happened. Hanging up the phone, I tried to calm myself down, but the sense of unease lingered. Suddenly, there was a faint knock on the door. My blood ran cold. I crept toward the front door, my heart pounding. Peering through the peephole, I saw the boy. He stood there, looking up at the door, his hood still pulled low over his face. He knocked again, louder this time. I took a step back, my hands trembling. What did he want? I tried to keep my breathing steady as I slowly backed away from the door, moving toward the kitchen to grab my phone. As I reached for it, I heard the soft click of the doorknob turning. He was trying to get in. Panic surged through me as I dialed 911, my fingers trembling. The operator answered, and I whispered frantically into the phone, explaining what was happening. As I spoke, the sound of metal scraping against the lock filled the room. He was trying to pick the lock.
Stay on the line with me,
the operator said calmly, though my heart raced in terror.
The police are on their way.
I could hear the boy mumbling outside, his voice low and unsettling. I strained to listen, but the words were incoherent, like he was having a conversation with himself. Then came the sound of footsteps. They were moving toward the back door. I raced to the back of the house, locking the door and turning off all the lights, praying he wouldn't see me through the windows. The house was pitch dark, but I could hear his footsteps outside, circling the house, trying to find another way in. And then silence. I stood frozen in the dark, straining to hear any movement, but there was nothing. Had he given up? Was he gone? I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting. Minutes passed like hours, and I didn't dare move. Finally, the sound of police sirens broke the silence. I peeked out of the window and saw the flashing lights approaching my house. Relief washed over me as I unlocked the door and let the officers in. They searched the property but found no sign of the boy. It was like he had vanished into thin air. The police took my statement and told me they'd patrol the area, but as they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another chance to come back. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every rustle outside sent my heart racing. I stayed up, gripping a kitchen knife, convinced he would return. A few days later, I received a call from the police. They had caught a teenage boy matching the description I gave. He had been found trying to break into another house a few blocks away. But the scariest part, he had been carrying a knife. They said he had been stalking women in the area for weeks, watching them, learning their routines, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I moved out of that house a week later, and I haven't felt safe living alone since. I was sitting at my computer in my house, the hum of my laptop mingling with the distant sounds of the city that never truly slept. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was knee-deep in a project for my software company, the glow of the screen casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The comfortable buzz of a recent dinner with friends faded, leaving me enveloped in the solitude of my workspace. As I navigated through lines of code, a faint noise interrupted my focus. I paused, straining to listen. It was subtle at first, like a whisper against the silence of the night. I shook my head, chalking it up to the old building settling. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. A rustling sound, as if someone were lurking in the hallway just outside my house. My heart began to race, a primal instinct kicking in. The silence shattered. A loud thud reverberated through the corridor, rattling my door like a warning bell. I jumped, adrenaline flooding my veins. Who was out there? I crept to the peephole, peering through with a mix of dread and curiosity. The hallway was empty, shrouded in shadows. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I retreated, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But then a heavy boot stomped against my door, and panic surged through me.
"Open up!"
A voice barked from the other side, threatening.
"I know you are in there!"
I froze, my breath hitching in my throat.
"Open up, or we will make you open up!"
The urgency in their voice sent a chill racing down my spine. My mind was a whirlpool of fear and confusion. I knew my house had seen its fair share of troubles, but this was different. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I fumbled with it. I dropped it, the screen cracking as it hit the floor. Damn it, I cursed silently. My options were running thin, and every second felt like an eternity. The door splintered as they kicked it again, and I heard the wood groan under the strain. I backed away, adrenaline coursing through me like electricity. My heart was in my throat, and the world outside faded away. All I could think about was survival. Then, with a deafening crash, the door flew open. Two men stormed in, their faces obscured by dark masks and their intentions cloaked in menace. One held a handgun, the other wielded a knife, glinting ominously in the dim light of my house. Their presence filled the space with an air of dread, and I instinctively dropped to the floor, a mix of fear and disbelief coursing through me.
"Get on the ground,"
the gunman shouted, advancing toward me. I obeyed, my body moving almost on autopilot, heart racing as I lay on the cold, hard floor. The men began to ransack my house, throwing my belongings aside as if they were nothing. The clatter of my laptop crashing to the ground sent a wave of anger coursing through me. My life, my memories, tossed aside like they meant nothing.
"What do you have?"
the man with the knife demanded, his voice a harsh growl. "Just leave me alone," I managed to plead, my voice shaky. He stepped closer, placing his boot firmly on my back, a twisted satisfaction gleaming in his eyes.
Shut up! Where's the cash? Where's the stuff?
Fear turned to desperation. I was hyper-aware of every second that passed, the sounds of my belongings being tossed aside, the mocking laughter echoing in my ears. The threat of violence hung in the air, and I knew I had to do something, anything. Then, the night erupted into chaos. A series of gunshots rang out, echoing from somewhere nearby. The men froze, their eyes darting toward the sound, a flicker of fear crossing their faces.
What the hell was that?
The one with the knife hissed, pulling his weapon closer as if it could shield him from whatever danger lurked outside.
Let's get out of here.
The gunman shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Just as they turned to flee, the one with the gun caught sight of me.
Don't move!
He yelled, pointing the weapon directly at me. In that moment, I felt a visceral understanding of my fragility. My life was literally in their hands. They bolted for the door, urgency driving their every move. My heart raced as I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline flooding my senses. I had to get away, had to escape the madness that had descended upon my home. I dashed to my phone, barely able to catch my breath as I dialed 911. Help! There are 2 armed men in my house, I gasped, trying to keep my voice steady.
Stay on the line.
The operator said calmly.
Help is on the way.
As I waited, I heard the men shouting in the hallway, their panic palpable.
We have to go now.
The minutes felt like hours, each second dragging as I kept my eyes glued to the door, ready for anything. The sirens blared in the distance, a sound that brought both relief and a tinge of fear. What would happen when the police arrived? Would these men retaliate? Finally, the sound of police officers bursting into the building sent a jolt of hope through me.
Hands in the air! Show us your hands!
But the chaos didn't stop there. I could hear the commotion as the officers confronted the intruders, shouts mixing with the tension in the air. I felt like a spectator in my own nightmare, trapped in my house as I listened to the commotion unfold outside my door. The sound of footsteps echoed closer, and the officers entered my house, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. "Are you okay?" one asked, scanning the room for any sign of danger. I think so," I stammered, still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. As I recounted the events, the police moved swiftly, assessing the situation and ensuring my safety. They assured me that they would find the intruders, that they would do everything in their power to bring them to justice. But as I sat on the floor, shaken and covered in the remnants of my disrupted life, I knew I would never feel safe in my own home again. That night, I learned a harsh truth. Sometimes, the darkness creeps in when you least expect it, and the monsters aren't just figments of your imagination. They can be real, lurking just outside your door, ready to invade your life without warning. The night felt unusually still as I sat curled up on the couch, the soft glow of my laptop illuminating the dark room. I had just moved in, and the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the house made every sound echo louder than it should. I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see a shadow flit by, but there was nothing. Just darkness. It was late, too late to be alone, I thought, but I had work to finish. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a reminder that time was slipping away. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves when I heard it. A faint rustling outside, just beyond the window. I froze, listening intently. The sound was gone, replaced by the distant hum of the night. Shaking my head, I dismissed it as the wind or maybe an animal. Still, an unsettling feeling settled in my stomach. As I resumed typing, the rustling returned, this time louder, accompanied by the faintest scrape against the wall. My heart raced as I glanced at the window, the darkness outside seeming to swallow the light. I stood up, cautiously approaching the glass, my pulse quickening. Nothing was there. I told myself it was my imagination, the remnants of a long day playing tricks on me. I turned to go back to my work, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The silence in the house felt heavier now, pressing down on me like a suffocating weight. Deciding to check the locks, I walked through the house. The front door was secure, the windows were shut tight, but as I made my way back to the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I thought of calling someone, anyone. That's when I heard it, louder this time. A sharp bang followed by a slow creaking sound as if something heavy was being pushed against the door. My heart dropped. I turned slowly, instinctively moving toward the back of the house, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the darkness seemed to creep closer, swallowing the light from my laptop. Suddenly, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the silence. I gasped, instinctively backing away, my mind racing. I could feel panic rising in my chest as I glanced around, searching for something, anything that could help. I was alone. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no one to call, no one to come to my rescue. I had to protect myself. Gripping a kitchen knife tightly, I moved stealthily toward the hallway. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting as I crept forward. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and panicked, drowning out the world around me. As I reached the end of the hallway, I caught sight of the front door, slightly ajar. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat as I peeked through the gap, the darkness beyond swallowing any trace of light. And then I saw him. A figure standing in the shadows, his back to me. My breath hitched as I recognized the silhouette. It was Jake, my ex-boyfriend, the one I thought I'd escaped. His presence felt like a ghost returning from the grave, and my body froze in terror. He was here. He had come to finish what he started. I stepped back, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't stay here, couldn't let him find me. With shaking hands, I turned and ran toward the kitchen, desperately searching for a way out. But as I reached for the back door, I heard him call out softly, chillingly, "Mia, I just want to talk." His voice dripped with malice, and I could feel my skin crawl. I knew better than to respond. I had to get out. With every ounce of strength I had left, I opened the back door and stepped into the cool night air. The moonlight illuminated the yard, but I didn't look back. I could hear him moving inside, the sound of footsteps growing louder. I sprinted toward the fence at the edge of the property, desperate to escape, but my feet felt heavy, as if the ground was trying to pull me back. I climbed over the fence, ignoring the sharp sting of splinters digging into my hands. As I hit the ground on the other side, I glanced back. He was there, standing in the doorway. A sinister smile plastered across his face. "You can't run forever, Mia." The words echoed in my mind as I took off into the night, the darkness swallowing me whole. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stop. The chase had only just begun. I ran down the street, my lungs burning and my legs aching, not daring to look back. I pounded on a neighbor's door, my voice hoarse as I cried for help. They let me in, eyes wide with concern as I explained, gasping for breath. The police arrived quickly, sirens blaring, but Jake was already gone. I watched as they searched the area, my heart pounding in my chest, the fear still coursing through me. They assured me they would find him, but all I could feel was the weight of his threats echoing in my mind. Hours later, after what felt like an eternity, the door swung open, and an officer stepped inside, a grim look on his face. "We found him," he said, relief washing over me as I slumped into a chair. "He's in custody." But the comfort didn't last. The officer continued, "He confessed to wanting to kill you, Mia. He said you left him and he couldn't bear the thought of you being happy without him. My stomach twisted. The realization of his intent hit me like a wave, leaving me breathless. I had escaped a monster, and now I had to live with the knowledge that he had wanted my life. The next few days were a blur of questions and anxiety, and as I sat in my room, the walls seemed to close in around me. I was safe now, but the trauma lingered, haunting me like a dark shadow. I would never forget the way he smiled, the way he promised I couldn't run forever. The image of him standing in my doorway, a figure from my past, haunted my dreams. Even in the safety of my home, I felt the weight of his presence, the way he had invaded my life. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house sending me spiraling back into fear. In the end, Jake was arrested, but the scars of that night remained. I was alive, but I would never be the same. Each day was a battle, but I fought to reclaim my life, knowing that I had escaped a nightmare. But the memory of that night would forever be etched in my mind.